Even the country's oldest Latino civil rights group came out against it, yet AOC keeps defending it, saying gender is fluid, language is fluid. Yes, and Latino voters are fluid. Redress the past, or reach out to the gettable white voter who says, you know what, I'd like a shot at getting in the pot business. But to do that, our entire audience.
Bill begins the discussion by delivering a blunt reality check to Democrats, one they probably didn't expect, but may have needed to hear. He points out that Donald Trump, the same candidate many analysts insisted had virtually no chance of winning, still managed to capture several seats Democrats believed were safely theirs. In the months leading up to the election, many Democrats appeared confident, even relaxed, about the outcome. Some acted as though victory was already guaranteed. The atmosphere in certain political circles felt more like a celebration waiting to happen than a competitive race. But the situation among voters was unfolding very differently. While political insiders were predicting an easy win, many voters had already decided they were going to support Trump. Their decision, according to Bill, reflected a deeper frustration that had been building for years. A number of people felt the politicians who claimed to represent them were no longer truly listening to their concerns. Instead of focusing on everyday economic and social issues, critics say some leaders spent more time emphasizing identity politics and symbolic messaging. For voters who felt overlooked, that shift created a sense of distance from the party. In the end, the election revealed that confidence inside political circles did not always match the mood among voters.
Last week, an 85% Latino congressional district on the border with Mexico, which had always voted heavily Democratic, flipped to the red team. And the campaign manager for the losing Democrat said, "We gave up a reliably Democratic congressional seat for no reason at all. We deserve to know why." Well, aside from your terrible attitude, I'm going to tell you why. Because these voters stopped seeing your candidate as their lawyer.
Some critics describe the strategy as politically puzzling. Instead of focusing primarily on the voters who already supported them, they argue that some leaders appeared more interested in appealing to groups that were not even directly part of the voting system. To many observers, that approach seemed risky from the start. The debate became even more visible with the promotion of the term Latinx. Supporters presented it as a modern and inclusive way to refer to people of Latin American heritage. However, many members of the Hispanic community said they did not identify with the label and felt it did not reflect their language or cultural traditions. Several polls showed that a large number of Hispanic voters were unfamiliar with the term or openly rejected it. Despite that reaction, some political figures continued using it, believing it demonstrated cultural awareness. Critics say the opposite may have happened. Instead of strengthening connections with voters, the issue created frustration and opened a political opportunity that Trump and his supporters were quick to highlight.
Their message to you was, I'm an American now. I'm here. Be my lawyer, not the lawyer for the migrants showing up in my backyard. Every month I see a new poll reporting how much Latinos despise the woke term Latinx. It's about as popular with them as a reboot of Speedy Gonzales.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, often known as AOC, has built much of her public image around supporting new progressive ideas and movements. For many of her supporters, that willingness to champion emerging social and political language keeps her base energized and engaged. Because of that approach, it isn't surprising that she has defended the use of the term Latinx, even though many people within the Hispanic community say they do not prefer it. AOC frequently presents herself as a strong voice from the Bronx who represents everyday working people. That narrative has become an important part of her political identity and campaign messaging. Critics, however, argue that the branding sometimes simplifies a more complex background. While she has Latino heritage in her family, some commentators point out that identity involves more than ancestry alone. Culture, traditions, and language also play a major role in how communities define themselves. Because of this, some observers believe her outreach efforts occasionally miss the mark, despite her intentions to connect.
Even the country's oldest Latino civil rights group came out against it, yet AOC keeps defending it, saying gender is fluid, language is fluid. Yes, and Latino voters are fluid.
Critics of certain education policies often argue that removing advanced academic courses, particularly those designed for high-performing students, may not achieve the fairness supporters hope for. Instead, they worry it could unintentionally lower academic standards across the system. These advanced classes have traditionally provided challenging environments where motivated students can push themselves and develop stronger skills. According to critics, eliminating or reducing those opportunities might remove important incentives for students who want to excel. When exceptional performance is no longer clearly recognized or rewarded, some fear it could reduce motivation. Students may begin to question why they should spend extra hours studying or putting in additional effort if the outcomes appear largely the same regardless of performance. Another concern involves the broader influence on school culture. High-achieving students often serve as examples for their peers, showing what strong academic effort can accomplish. When clear benchmarks of excellence fade, critics argue that the system may lose visible role models who inspire others to aim higher. From this perspective, the issue is not simply about fairness or equality. Instead, critics worry that by removing pathways for advanced learning, the education system could unintentionally shift away from encouraging excellence and toward a model where maintaining uniform outcomes becomes the primary goal.
And more of them now than ever are identifying as Republican. So are Asian Americans, whose support for Democrats is down 16 points since the last election. A lot of that is because, in the name of achieving equity in schools, Democrats in deep blue cities have made it a mission to eliminate the advanced programs at which Asian kids excel. Asian parents said, "Okay, I wish all kids well, not a racist, but I need someone who acts like my lawyer."
There is an ongoing debate about how recent education policies may be shaping the school system and the students moving through it. Some critics believe the long-term effects are still unfolding and could influence future generations of leaders, workers, and innovators. Even if political leadership changes over time, they argue that policy decisions made today can remain visible in classrooms for many years. Those raising concerns often point to what they see as changing attitudes among students. In their view, some young people appear less academically competitive or less driven than earlier generations. Critics say the problem is not that reforms attempted to support struggling students. Helping those who need additional resources has always been an important goal of education. Their concern, however, is that certain reforms may have unintentionally lowered expectations for everyone. Instead of raising academic standards and encouraging students to aim higher, they argue the system may have shifted toward reducing the difficulty level in the name of fairness and inclusion. Supporters of these reforms strongly disagree with that interpretation. They argue the goal is to create a more balanced and equitable system where every student has a real chance to succeed. The question many people continue debating is whether current policies strengthen education's role as an equalizer or risk weakening the standards that once pushed students to reach their full potential.
If you're a parent and wanted schools to reopen a lot sooner than they did after COVID shutdowns, or think maybe your kid is getting a bad education partly because it's nearly impossible to fire a lousy teacher, yeah, you're going to say, "Congratulations, teachers, you got yourself a good lawyer. The Democratic Party's always got your back, 100%. But I've noticed my kid is kind of an idiot. So I may be looking for new representation."
Another issue that has sparked strong reactions among voters is the proposal to cancel large amounts of student loan debt. Supporters describe the idea as a compassionate step that could provide relief to millions of borrowers who have struggled under heavy financial burdens for years. For many graduates, monthly loan payments can delay major life decisions such as buying a home, starting a business, or building long-term savings. Critics, however, see the issue from a different perspective. They argue that student loans are agreements that individuals voluntarily accepted when they chose to pursue higher education. In most cases, students understood that earning a degree would require borrowing money and that those loans would eventually need to be repaid. From this viewpoint, repayment is considered part of personal financial responsibility. Critics say working through that obligation can teach valuable lessons about budgeting, patience, and long-term planning. Because of that belief, they worry that widespread loan forgiveness might send the message that financial commitments can be erased through political pressure. Supporters of cancellation counter that the current system has placed an unfair burden on an entire generation of borrowers. The disagreement between these two perspectives has turned student loan policy into one of the most debated economic and political issues in the country today.
President Biden wants to cancel hundreds of billions of dollars in student debt. Okay, but the poorer two-thirds of American kids who don't get a college degree, are going to say, why should the people who didn't go to college and make less money subsidize the people who did go and make more? You want me to chip in so some liberal arts college can build a bigger rock wall? You're not my lawyer.
Critics often argue that outreach to the LGBTQ+ community has become a central feature of messaging from many leaders on the political left. In their view, the emphasis sometimes appears so strong that nearly every major speech, policy announcement, or public statement seems directed toward that specific audience. Supporters see this as an effort to promote equality and representation. Critics, however, interpret it differently. From their perspective, the focus can begin to look less like inclusive leadership and more like targeted political pandering. The question they raise is straightforward. What about everyone else? What about families struggling with rising costs, workers trying to keep up with rent and groceries, or communities focused on jobs, education, and public safety?
A universal basic income probably sounds pretty good to a lot of people struggling without a college degree. And a number of cities have been running pilot programs in guaranteed income. But the West Hollywood program had to be suspended because it was unconstitutional. They set up a program where 25 residents were to get $1,000 for 18 months, but only a few identified as LGBT, the rest of that. Why? Because they need money more than any other people? Because no one in West Hollywood will hire a gay person?
These critics argue that when one group receives a large share of political attention, other voters may begin to feel their concerns are being pushed aside. Even if that perception is not the intention, it can still influence how people interpret political priorities. Politics, they say, requires balancing many voices and interests at the same time. When outreach appears too narrowly focused, it can leave some voters feeling overlooked. And when frustration grows among large groups of voters, it often becomes visible during elections. For critics, the lesson is that leadership should aim to address the needs of the entire country, not just a single segment of it.
When he ran in 2020, Bernie Sanders said he would legalize marijuana on his first day as president, but that the business of selling pot would be awarded first to those who suffered most from the drug war. And you know what? I can't argue with that instinct. The drug war has been a horrendous instrument of prejudice and punishment for racial minorities, so it seems fair that they jump the line for weed franchises the way Indians did for casinos. But it's also what's holding up Republican support for legalizing weed nationally, which would be good for everybody. And these are the hard, practical choices the Democrats have to weigh.
Many people know that Bill Maher has long been an outspoken supporter of marijuana legalization. Over the years, he has joked about it so frequently that some fans say he treats it almost like a personal philosophy, rather than simply a policy issue. That's why the latest political twist has caught so many observers off guard. According to recent discussions in political circles, Republicans could potentially move toward supporting national marijuana legalization, especially after comments connected to former President Trump. If that scenario ever became reality, the irony would be difficult to ignore. Maher has spent years criticizing Republicans while encouraging Democrats to push harder for legalization. If the policy were to move forward under Republican leadership, it would create an unusual political moment. For Maher, it might even spark a humorous dilemma. Would he continue criticizing the party he often opposes, or acknowledge that they delivered a policy he has supported for decades? Either way, it would certainly be one of the more ironic twists in modern political debate.
Redress the past, or reach out to the gettable white voter who says, you know what, I'd like a shot at getting in the pot business. But to do that, our entire audience.
As the political debate continues, critics argue that some Democratic strategies may be creating challenges for the party. They say certain policies or messaging approaches have frustrated voters who feel their everyday concerns are not always receiving enough attention. Issues such as economic pressure, education standards, and financial responsibility remain top priorities for many Americans. Some commentators point to controversies surrounding terms like Latinx, student loan forgiveness proposals, and broader cultural debates as examples of policies that have sparked strong reactions. In their view, these discussions sometimes overshadow issues that directly affect daily life for many families and workers. At the same time, Republicans have attempted to position themselves as an alternative on several topics, even stepping into debates that were once strongly associated with liberal priorities, including marijuana legalization. Ultimately, voters will decide how these competing visions shape the future political landscape. Elections often become moments when frustrations, expectations, and hopes all collide at the ballot box, determining which ideas resonate most strongly with the public.